Hi, my name's Catherine McNulty, and I create these videos about grief because I went through my own grief process, and I can tell you that grief and grieving is hard, and most people don't talk about it, and there is not a how-to manual. And for me, when I came out of my grief, I looked back and I said, this could be so much easier. Had I known what I know now, I wouldn't have suffered so much. So I feel very compelled to create these videos, hopefully to help you through the grief process, to tell you how it is for real, let you know what's coming, and hopefully make it just a little bit easier on you so that you don't have to do it alone. So today we're going to talk about forgiveness, and we're going to talk about, most importantly, how to forgive ourselves. There's a whole conversation that we can have about how to forgive other people, but I think I want to start here with how to forgive ourselves because that can be so challenging for so many of us, and I'm sharing that because I'm just as guilty as the next. So here's the thing, we all know that grief is really hard, and we feel intense emotions after we lose the people that we love, and they might not be emotions that we're familiar with, that we want to deal with. Things like grief, shame, guilt, blame. All of these emotions can make it really hard to move forward, and they can keep us stuck. And I can tell you from personal experience, when you are stuck in grief, you are literally stuck. Imagine your feet in a mud pit, not being able to move. You are not moving forward in your grief, and that is hard. And that extends your grief. It makes your grief harder. It extends the pain that you feel, and we just don't want that. So we're going to talk about how to get unstuck when it comes to forgiving yourself. So oftentimes, we are either unable or unwilling, and those are two operative words, unable or unwilling to forgive ourselves. And when we do that, we stay stuck. And like I said, we're not moving forward. So here's what we're going to do today. 4 questions we're going to answer. What is forgiveness and how does it relate to our grief? Why is forgiving ourselves so damn hard? And then why should we forgive ourselves at all? And then if we agree that we should forgive ourselves, how are we going to start to let that go and actually really forgive ourselves? Because that's the real challenge. But I think ultimately that should be the goal. That should be what we want, because when you don't forgive yourself, when you stay stuck, it's really just, it's creating more pain for you. And it's pain that's independent, honestly, of the grief that you're experiencing because you've lost somebody. That pain in and of itself is hard enough. But when you compound things like not forgiving yourself, that can be even harder. So we're going to walk through those 4 steps. So first, what is forgiveness and how does it relate to our grief? Okay, so as I always do, I find it really interesting to go to the dictionary textbook definition, and then I look at it and I dive into it and I pull it apart. So according to what I found on the internet, which must be true and real, forgiving others is hard, but forgiving yourself is even harder. Surprise, surprise. And here's what they found as the action. Forgiveness is the action or process of forgiving yourself or being forgiven. It can be to pardon. Imagine pardoning yourself, giving absolution, or exonerating. So imagine being able to pardon, to give yourself absolution, or exonerating yourself as a means of forgiving yourself. Here's what also I found, that it's a deliberate decision to release feelings of resentment or vengeance toward yourself or someone else who has harmed you. That it's a deliberate decision. I love the words action in this, the act of forgiving. I love that it's a deliberate decision, right? And the reason why I love these terms is because one, it's something you can do, and two, it's something that you can control. So much of grief seems so out of control, doesn't it? If you agree with that, let me know in the comments that yes, grief is an uncontrollable experience that is hard. It really, really is. So again, so it's an act of forgiving, and then it's a deliberate decision. And here's what else I found, which I think is really, really interesting, is that forgiveness means giving up the suffering of the past. Something that's already happened, that's done, that's unchangeable. And it's a letting go, and it's a practice. So we're going to talk about all of these things as we move forward. But I'm going to give you a quote now, and I'm going to read the quote later because I think it'll have even more meaning after we talk about it. The quote is, "Forgiveness does not change the past, but it does enlarge the future." So we're going to talk about that. So number 2, why is forgiving yourself so difficult? Well, have you thought about this? If you are in a position to be blaming, feeling guilty, beating yourself up, have you thought about why you do that? And I think when I was in this situation, it was like, well, I just wish I could stop beating myself up. But why? Why should you forgive yourself, and why is it so difficult to give that up? Well, here's what I think. Brene Brown has told us in her work that when things happen that we don't like, things like the loss of a loved one, something happens that we don't want, we need to find blame. That our mind needs to find someone to blame. So we either blame someone else or we blame ourselves. It is often easier to blame ourselves than to blame someone else. For some reason, we think that we need to be perfect when it comes to our loved ones, whether it's taking care of someone who's sick, whether it's doing something or saying the right things or making sure that you're there at the right time. When your loved one passed away, did you do all the things you were supposed to do leading up to their death? Maybe you didn't talk to them and an accident happened. Maybe there was something else that you could have done. That's the things that we beat ourselves up about. But yet we expect ourselves to be perfect through all of it. And I think that that's the thing, is like, you don't expect other people to be perfect, but yet we expect ourselves to be perfect. And so that makes forgiving yourself difficult. It's also sort of a way to hang on to what's happening. It puts you in a place that it's one thing to think about, and beating yourself up can oftentimes be easier than dealing with other emotions or other things, or maybe ultimately dealing with the true pain of the person that you've lost. And this is the point where rumination kicks in. And if you don't know what rumination is, that's the thing that keeps you up in the middle of the night, where you're replaying events over and over and over again in your head. And no matter what you do, if you ever lay down, if you ever stop for a minute and pause, these are the things that go off in your head. And it's a replay over and over and over again. And again, it's your mind's way of processing what happened. It's your mind's way of saying, well, it's the what if scenarios. What if this had happened? What if I had done this? What if I didn't do this? It's that back and forth. That's what rumination is. And it's something that can really keep you stuck. But again, it's a necessary and natural part of the grief process. So don't try to stop it, but recognize it for what it is. And again, if you don't forgive yourself, you feel like we deserve to beat ourselves up because maybe we did something wrong. Maybe we did, maybe we didn't. but for whatever reason, we feel like we deserve to feel the maximum amount of pain. And so we blame ourselves and we prevent forgiveness and we beat ourselves up. And that can go on for a month, 3 months, 6 months, years. I've seen people who have beat themselves up literally and stayed stuck in their grief for more than 10 years. And there was this one woman who had lost her baby and she blamed herself for all of it. And one of the things that we realized as I was talking to her, the thought just came to my mind because I had had a similar experience where I was blaming myself. But the reason why I was blaming myself and what I realized, and I asked her this, I says, is it possible that you continue to beat yourself up and you blame yourself because it's all you have? And if you let go of that blame, if you let go of the pain that you feel, that self-loathing, that somehow your loss is going to be more meaningful, less meaningful, that you're going to forget the person that you've lost. Because over time, the pain becomes all that you know. You sometimes forget all of the happy memories and all the things with whatever period of time that you had with your loved one, whether it was a baby, a child, a spouse, adult, a parent. Is it a way to hang on? That's a question. And we'll keep exploring that. So number 3, well, why should we forgive ourselves anyways? Well, we talked about it being a way to hang on. We talked about it being potentially a reason and a way to avoid the pain and loss. But here's the thing, is we need to process our grief. We don't deserve to be in pain. And oftentimes, I haven't heard a lot of places of the goal of what's the goal of grief. Well, grief is something that is a goal and that there is an end point. And it doesn't mean that you end grief, right? Because you will always feel a certain amount of grief. But the end point should be, and again, the 5 stages of grief say acceptance, but I think it's more than acceptance. Accepting the loss is part of the process and saying, okay, this happened. There isn't anything I can do. I can't beat myself up anymore because it's not going to change the outcome. It's not going to change the outcome. And here's another thing is, what about the people that you've lost? If they were talking to you, if they were speaking to you or could talk to you, what would they say? Would they want you to be hurting as badly as you are? Would they want you to be beating yourself up? Do you think that they didn't know that you love them? And maybe even if they didn't know that you loved them, which I bet they did, because you wouldn't be hurting as much as you are. You wouldn't be looking for these videos if you didn't love them. But they loved you too. And they wouldn't want that for you. And here's the thing about grief. So many people think that grief is about death, and grief is not about death. Grief is about you living without your loved one and finding a way to move on and to move forward. To not forget them, but to process what happened, to understand how they impacted you and your life and what the meaning was that they brought to your life. And then finding a way to move forward with your life, with that pain, letting some of that pain go, and then finding ways to live your life in ways that will honor them. That's what Grief Inspired is about. That's what I try that's what I want my messaging to be, is that you need to walk through the grief. You need to feel the pain, right? We talked before that maybe not forgiving yourself is a way of not letting go of the pain. Because if you stop beating yourself up, what's going to be left? You're going to be left with the pain and the grief because you love that person. And it's time to feel that, and you have to step into the pain. And I know that it hurts, and I know that I didn't want to do it. But sometimes it's unavoidable. But you got to let that pain in, and it's almost like letting the pain go through you. And you will process it. You'll process it in your mind. You'll process it in your heart. I have a couple of quotes. And these quotes are about forgiving others, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn them and make them about forgiving yourself. Forgive others, not because they deserve forgiveness, but because you deserve peace. Forgive yourself because you deserve peace. You deserve to spend your days, your hours, your minutes, all of that rumination that's going off in your mind, thinking about all of the reasons why you love the person, all of the reasons why you hurt, the good reasons, the things that you miss, the conversations that you had, the hugs that you shared, the moments, even the little tiny special moments, the way they spoke to you, something they said to you, the smell of the top of my baby's head, whatever it is. Those are the things I want you to lean into. And by doing that, you can forgive yourself. The other quote is that forgiveness is not about letting someone off the hook for their actions, but freeing ourselves of negative energies that bind us to them. And here's the thing, is that not forgiving yourself, beating yourself up, it is negative energy, and you're pouring that in, and you're actually creating more negative energy in your life. And having negative energy is the exact opposite of any type of healing. So here's the question, is how do you let it go? So hopefully by now you're in agreement that, not forgiving yourself is only hurting you. It's only hurting others in your life because you're in a negative place, because you're not where you deserve to be. But how do you let it go? And part of it is, like I said before, it is a surrender. And it's choosing, it's an action and a decision to let the blaming, let the lack of forgiveness, the beating yourself up, it's being able and willing to let that go. And if you can do that, that's where healing is. Healing is on the other side of that. And again, it's a practice. And I was just mentioning before about, sitting in these negative energies. Well, what's the opposite of that? The opposite is finding positive energy, meaning looking to the future and creating something new and different. Joe Dispenza says, you can't move to the future hanging on to the emotions of the past. So if you can let the past go, if you can let what happened go, if you can learn to forgive yourself, well, it opens up the future. And so I want you to take a couple minutes and ask yourself this question. What if you could let it go? What if you could stop blaming yourself? What if you could stop beating yourself up? What if you could forgive yourself? Spend time thinking about that. What would that look like in your life, in your world? And then the next question is, if you could forgive yourself, how would that feel? What emotions would circle through your heart when you think of your loved one? What would that be like? And what would you feel? And going back to that quote that we had at the beginning that says, forgiveness does not change the past, but it does enlarge your future. The hard part about grief and about all of this is that you can't change the past and you can't bring them back. But you can hold on to the love that you have, because the love that you have in your heart for them, it's not going anywhere. Even if you let the pain go, I can tell you that for sure. It stays there. You will not lose it. It's okay to let go of the pain, of the hurt, of the blame. It's okay to let go of it. And so envision what that would be like for you. And then finally, I would say, you know, as you're saying, well, what would it be like if I did forgive myself? You know, the next question is to be reminded that grief is not about death. It's about your life. It's about what you do with your life. And how can the impact that this person, whoever it is, your spouse, your mother, your father, your sibling, your brother, your child, your baby, whoever it is, how can their presence and their meaning in your life, how can you project that into your future? What can you do with that? Who are you going to be now that you've learned what you've learned from them, or that they've even touched your life? How can you put that into your future? That's where you find healing from grief. That's where you're enlarging your future. And just as Joe Dispenza says, I'll leave you with this because it's so powerful and it's so important. You can't move to the future hanging on to the emotions of the past. And these negative emotions that are just beating yourself up and blaming yourself, they aren't doing you any good. So it's time to let it go. And it's a practice. So you're not going to get it right on the first try. But I guarantee that if you keep going, you will find healing. You will be able to forgive yourself. And you will be able to move on and enlarge your future. Have a good day today.